Chapter 60. I caught a pushover. Chongmyung laughed softly. No, it's unreal. Aren't these people supposed to be merchants? They're really going to give me so much just because I saved one person? Money, wealth, riches. Didn't all his ancestors say that money is the best? He was already one of the wealthiest people in Shaanxi after he robbed his Sahyong's warehouse, but it was always fun to see his wealth increase. But it wasn't so much. He was just joking when he asked for half of their wealth. Just a quarter of their wealth would call for celebrations. Of course, they wouldn't have given such wealth to Chongmyung out of gratitude alone. They may have offered their entire fortune when Hua Munyak was still ill, but the situation and rewards would naturally change once he recovered. It's common knowledge that people change their minds before and after a situation resolves. Nevertheless, to give so much wealth to Chongmyung without complaint, there must be some ulterior motive. However, even if they wanted something from Chongmyung, Chongmyung wasn't the kind to easily comply. I just won't do it. If Chongmyung was an average child, he might feel burdened receiving so much wealth. But unfortunately for Master Huang, he was no child. Rather, he was more like an ancient fossil from the past. If they had known, they would have taken a different approach. Anyway, everything has been resolved. He rescued Master Huang, and in return, he promised that they would help Mount Hua. He will also head to Mount Hua with Chongmyung as soon as the preparations are done. So it can be said that everything here was settled. There was just one thing left. Chongmyung smiled and looked at the person approaching. Hey, are you feeling well? Lee Songbek, the second-class disciple of the Jongnam sect, approached Chongmyung, who was lying on the wooden floor, and stared down at him. What is it? Lee Songbek looked at Chongmyung and then answered. I need to return to my sect soon. Ah, that's good. It must be lonely being here all by yourself. Congratulations. Thank you. Lee Songbek didn't turn back after saying that. Seeing him standing there blankly, Chongmyung asked, Is there anything you want to say? At those words, he faintly smiled. Disciple. What? I understand that you set me up in order to solve this problem. Huh? I mean, the results were good, so I can understand what happened. Chongmyung sat up and looked at Lee Songbek. It would be strange to call what you did a trap. Wasn't I the one who initially sought to trap you? Lee Songbek smiled. So you aren't going to blame me? Chongmyung smiled. This kid has a strange personality. Kids these days were different from the old days. All the sects which came in contact with Chongmyung were anxious and hostile towards him. Because of that, he never bothered checking the personalities of the Jongnam sect disciples. Well, what do you want to say? It doesn't matter if I've been humiliated, put in danger, or played by you. It all happened because I was lacking. Lee Songbek spoke with a stiff face. The only thing which bothers me is the time we crossed swords. I still don't understand what happened. Chongmyung narrowed his eyes. So? If you allow, I would like to spar with you again. This time, I have no hidden intentions like the last time, and am sincerely requesting you to spar. Chongmyung scratched his cheek. Well, look at this. He thought that this kid was going to start another fight. It was strange that he was okay with being played by Chongmyung. He thought that the kid would charge at him like a wild boar. Instead, he chose to bury his grudges and ask for a spar to understand what happened. I don't think he's just looking to get beat up. This was quite a funny reaction. What do I do? Sparring means comparing each other's skills. From Lee Songbek's point of view, it could be meaningful to learn something from Chongmyung. But for Chongmyung, there was nothing to gain from Lee Songbek. So, there was no reason to accept the request. Well, fine. But there was no reason to reject it either. Chongmyung stood up and pointed to the yard. Over there? Let's go where people can't see. Phew, I'm scared. Are you trying to be sneaky again? As Chongmyung pretended to slit his throat, Lee Song-baek sighed. Young disciple, I'm not a fool. It is shocking, but I know that your skills are superior to mine. Oh! Chongmyoung looked at him with interest. Didn't I tell you? I want to know what happened last time. Chongmyoung smiled. You're going to regret it. Even then, it is fine. Alright, well, then let's go. When Chongmyoung moved, Lee Song-baek followed him with a firm expression. Lee Song-baek exhaled a low breath. He was nervous. Lee Song-baek wasn't nervous even when he became a Saihung, nor when he fought with his fellow disciples or Saihungs. However, looking at Chongmyoung in front of him, he felt his pulse race as his heart pounded in his chest. Small. He carefully thought about it. This disciple was still a child. It was embarrassing to call Chongmyoung a child, but that doesn't change that he was at least 10 years younger than Lee Song-baek. He was young enough to be the son of one of the elders. There is at least one generation gap between us. A generation gap meant the difference between a teacher and a disciple. This meant that Lee Song-baek, a second-class disciple, could take a third-class disciple under him, like Chongmyoung. Of course, it was difficult for him to actually take one in because he had to concentrate on his training. In other words, he was now holding his sword against someone young enough to be his disciple. But what was this? This pressure? He recognized Chongmyoung as an opponent and stood against him. But an immense pressure he had never felt before weighed him down. Why am I so nervous? It was like standing against one of the elders. There was no way a child could be at that level though. In fact, not once had he felt Chongmyoung trying to use his internal ki. Yet, it felt like a fierce opponent was standing on the other side. Biting his lip, Lee Song-baek tried to reignite his fighting spirit. I need to check this with my own eyes. And he looked. He seems to have good senses. Chongmyoung was quite interested upon seeing Lee Song-baek, whose sword was already shaking. Right now, Chongmyoung poses no threat to Lee Song-baek. However, Lee Song-baek was unable to relax, as if a mighty warrior was peering down at him. Pretty sharp senses. He might one day become the Jungnam sect's supreme sword. In the past, when Chongmyoung was that age, was there people of the same caliber in the Jungnam sect? Well, not sure. It was a time when Chongmyoung held no interest in others. He was too busy sharpening his own sword skills and trying to avoid getting caught by his Saihungs for doing the wrong things. Even then, he couldn't think of anyone in the past that could match up. A person with great senses meant greater potential to grow. He might not stand out much right now, but as he gets older and trains more, he will begin to advance several times faster compared to the others. He could even become the Jungnam sect's supreme sword in the distant future. But the sad thing is, he was born into the same era I was born into. Chongmyoung gently raised his sword. Should he teach Lee Song-baek a lesson? Are you coming? When Chongmyoung shook his head and pointed the sword at his opponent, Lee Song-baek shuddered and backed away slightly before pulling his sword forward with clenched teeth. The fact that he was still standing there showed how desperately he was trying not to back down. After taking several deep breaths, Lee Song-baek struggled to open his mouth. Can I ask you one thing before we start? Yes, anything. Who is this young disciple? I'm Chongmyoung of Mount Hua. Lee Song-baek clenched his teeth. How are you so accomplished? You clearly can't have been learning the sword for a long time. I learned this sword for 100 years now, you bastard. Chongmyoung hated how his age was always being used against him. He didn't like it, as in the past, Chongmyoung was a lot stronger than he was currently. It has been less than a year since Chongmyoung started training, and he progressed slowly as he chose to build a stronger foundation. However, he had already focused on polishing his sword for over 10 years in the past, and reached a point that no one dared to challenge him. So, there's nothing to be flustered about. The world is inherently unfair, but that doesn't mean that you don't have a chance either. The important thing is to believe in your own path, isn't it? Are you saying that if I believe in my sword and work hard, I will be able to defeat you someday? Could be. Chongmyung waved his hand. But it's fine. You won't be ashamed if you can't win against me. Rather, you will understand that it is an honor to have shared a duel with me. Weird. Too weird. Lee Song-baek's eyes sunk in. As they talked, it seemed like he gradually relaxed a bit. Be careful. I know that I'm not good enough, so I'll do the best I can from the start. Sure. Lee Song-baek slightly twisted his sword. Seeing that, Chongmyung narrowed his eyes. What is this? A small change in the sword's movement. The Jongnam sect values precision and sharpness. There was no way they could twist a sword like this. Showing the blade and moving it in front of the opponent is mainly used in the illusion sword technique. Right, a Mount Hua sword technique. I will deal with you using the 12-movement snow flower sword. 12-movement snow flower sword? Chongmyung tilted his head. Did the Jongnam sect have such a technique? Normally, they had the 36-movement Tansha sword. It seemed like something new had been invented in Chongmyung's absence. Here I come. Sure. Lee Song-baek screamed and rushed towards Chongmyung. Chongmyung had a gloomy look as he watched his approach. What do I do? Should he trample on the juniors of the Jongnam sect, or teach them kindly and help them grow? No matter how bad my personality is, if the opponent was an elder or a great disciple, the situation would be different. But now, it was a child. The priority was to teach. It was then. Lee Song-baek's sword changed. It wasn't fast, but heavy. Not flashy, but colorful. A change that was entirely different from the Jongnam sect's methods, which Chongmyung was familiar with until now, unfolded. Upon seeing the change, Chongmyung's face contorted like a demon in a fury. This! Chongmyung's wooden sword swung furiously. Kwang! Lee Song-baek coughed up blood and fell back in just a few seconds. However, Chongmyung wasn't satisfied, so he grabbed Lee Song-baek by the collar and pulled him close to his face. Seeing Chongmyung's demon-like visage, Lee Song-baek struggled to breathe. You! Where did you learn that technique? You... Chongmyung bit his lip. 12-movement snowflower sword technique. What bullshit. Those words may deceive those who don't know any better, but Chongmyung wouldn't be deceived. The change was dull and clumsy, but the basic form of the sword was something Chongmyung knew very well. Plum Blossom. The sword of Mount Hua. A sword representing Mount Hua. A sword that was the essence of Mount Hua. The 24-movement Plum Blossom sword technique, which was lost in Mount Hua, now was unfolded in the hands of Lee Song-baek.